Hello, my dear friends. Hello, my dear listeners. How are you all? I hope you are doing best in your own situation with utmost honesty and love. So, let's start the new chapter in the life of Sri Ramakrishna Paramhansa-Dev in the company of devotees and scholars. The reader will remember that the Brahmani was commissioned to convey a divine message to two other devotees. She would often say to the master, "If you are willing, I shall write to them to come here." One day he gave her the permission, and in due course Chandra came. The master was invited that day to visit the Brahmani, though she had kept Chandra's arrival secret. She and Chandra were talking together when he entered the room. The Brahmani greeted him, and shortly afterwards he fell into a trance. Suddenly he shouted, "Ah, here is Chandra! Is this not Chandra?" Then he became motionless. Chandra took hold of his hands and called him loudly by name 3 or 4 times. The master soon came back to normal consciousness. "You seem to know me," said Chandra. "Why did you forget me so long?" "It was the Lord's will," replied the master. They conversed for some time. Chandra was a great devotee and Sri Ramakrishna loved him. He said that Chandra was endowed with some of the power of the Lord Vishnu, and it was because of this that he could restore the master to a normal state of mind from samadhi so easily. But he looked so insignificant that Hriday seriously doubted his spiritual greatness and called it in question. Sri Ramakrishna silenced him, but one day when Chandra came to see Sri Ramakrishna, the latter said to Hriday, "Just put an ochre cloth on him and then mark the result." When this was done, Chandra was overwhelmed with a strange emotion. With a smile, Sri Ramakrishna drew Hriday's attention to the transformation. Chandra had acquired in course of his sadhana a power by means of which he could make himself invisible. Sri Ramakrishna said that Girija, the other protege of the Brahmani, had similar powers. He too came to Dakshineshwar. One evening he accompanied the master to the neighboring garden of Shambhu Chandra Malik, who was a great admirer of Sri Ramakrishna and thought it a rare privilege to be of service to him. All three were so engrossed in spiritual discussion that they did not notice that evening had deepened into night. When the master and Girija turned their steps towards Dakshineshwar, it was so dark that they stumbled. Sri Ramakrishna was particularly distressed. Seeing him in his plight, Girija suddenly stopped and said, "Wait a bit, brother, I will give you light." Then he turned his back, and from it a powerful light was emitted, which lit the way up to the gate of the Kali temple. The master said that he easily found his way with the help of that light. But he concluded the narration, neither Chandra nor Girija retained those powers. While they lived with me, the gracious mother took them away so that they might turn their attention without distraction to the realization of God. We have already said that the Kali temple of Dakshineshwar was a favorite resort of devotees and sadhus because of its seclusion and holy association, as well as of Rani Rasmani's liberality. Pointing to some of his disciples of English education, Sri Ramakrishna once said, "It was only after the coming of Keshav Chandra Sen that young Bengal began to frequent this temple, but long before that, innumerable monks, ascetics, and devotees of various orders used to stream in here. They would stop here for a few days on their way of Gangasagar or to Puri. That was before the opening of the railways. At special times, sadhus of a particular class would congregate in large numbers. Once monks belonging to the Ramayat sect of Vaishnavas began to come. Their devotion, faith, and steadfastness to service beggar all description. It was from one of them that I got Ramlala. Another sadhu belonging to this sect had a wonderful faith in the name of God. All he had was a water pot and a book. The book was his treasure. He worshipped it daily with flowers and from time to time pored over it. After I knew him, one day I pressed him hard to let me have a look at it. On opening it, I found on every page only two words, Om Rama, written in bold red letters. What is the use, he explained to me, of reading a library of books? God is the one origin of the Vedas, the Puranas, and all other scriptures, and there is no difference between him and his name. What is contained in the four Vedas, the 18 Puranas, and in all other sacred books is comprised in one of his names. So I am satisfied with his name alone. Such was his tremendous faith in the Lord's name. So, people of this class continued to come for some time. When their visits became less frequent, a different class of men, monks of the Paramhansa order, began to come in. Not Bhagavans, but real sadhus. There would be a regular crowd in this room day and night, and the one theme of their discussion was Vedanta, the nature of Brahman and Maya and all that. I was then suffering from a terrible attack of dysentery, and Hriday was nursing me. But I always followed those discussions, and when they were unable to come to any decision on a mooted point, someone from within this, pointing to his own body, would throw out a suggestion in simple words, and everyone would be satisfied. The master sometimes related interesting tales about some of the monks he had thus made. He said, one day a sadhu came with a serene light on his countenance. He would sit from hours at a time, smiling to himself. Coming out of his room morning and evenings, he would look at the sky and Ganges and the trees, and raising his arms, dance with joy. Sometimes he would roll in laughter and shout, Bravo! What fun! How beautiful is this projected universe! That was his prayer and meditation after he had tasted of all the sweetness of divine bliss. I remember another monk who had attained to the highest illumination and yet looked like a madman. Naked, covered with dust, with long hair and nails, and a nasty quilt like cloth round his body, he looked like a ghoul. He stood before the Kali temple and chanted a hymn to the mother with such fervor that the whole temple shook, and it were, and the mother seemed delighted. Then he went to eat with the beggars, but even they turned him out because of his repulsive appearance. Then I found him taking the leavings of the beggars' meals and some dogs from the heap of discarded leaflets. He had one of his arms around a dog's neck, and man and dog were eating from the same leaf. The dog was quite at home with him. Watching this scene, I was inwardly horrified lest I too should become the same. I came away and said to Hriday that he was not an ordinary lunatic, that his was the madness of knowledge. At this, Hriday ran after him and found him going out of the temple compound. He followed him to some distance, begging for some instructions as to how he might realize God. At first, the monk said nothing, but finding Hriday persistent, he stopped and pointed to some ditch water on the roadside, said, when this ditch water and the water of the Ganges appear just the same to you, then you will realize God. Hriday wanted to hear something more and prayed to be allowed to follow him as a disciple, but the monk went his way without replying. When he found that Hriday persisted in following him, he took up a brick to throw at him and put him to flight. Then he quickly disappeared, and Hriday lost track of him. Great sadhus often live like that to escape public notice. That man was a real Paramhansa. So, my dear friends, today we are stopping here. We will start the next episode of this journey through the life of our master Sri Ramakrishna Paramhansa Dev in the next episode of Life of Masters. So, till then, be happy, be jolly, and keep praying. Shubhamastu.